This is Dan Bernal, Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Pelosi here in San Francisco, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. Right now, we're dialing out to tens of thousands of people in our community to join tonight's call. We want to get as many people on the line as possible before we begin. Thank you for your patience. Tonight, Congresswoman Pelosi and her guests will be discussing Democrats' work to build back better for the people, including the care economy, climate change, infrastructure, and more. Speaker Pelosi will be joined by Congresswoman Castor, Chair of the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, Linda Asato, the Executive Director of the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network, and Rudy Gonzalez, Secretary-Treasurer of San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council. If you have a question for any of the speakers, just press 0 on your phone keypad now to be added to the queue. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. To stay informed about Congresswoman Pelosi's work in the Congress, please visit pelosi.house.gov and scroll down to sign up for the Pelosi Update weekly email newsletter. Again, thank you for joining Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi's telephone town hall meeting. This is Dan Bernal, Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Pelosi here in San Francisco, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. Right now, we're dialing out to tens of thousands of people in our community to join tonight's call. We want to get as many people on the line as possible before we begin. Thank you for your patience. Tonight, Congresswoman Pelosi and her guests will be discussing Democrats' work to build back better for the people, including the care economy, climate change, infrastructure, and more. Speaker Pelosi will be joined by Congresswoman Castor, Chair of the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, Linda Asato, the Executive Director of California Child Care and Resource and Referral Network, and Rudy Gonzalez, Secretary-Treasurer of San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council. If you have a question for any of the speakers, just press 0 on your phone keypad now to be added to the queue.
Okay,
we will try to answer as many questions as possible. To stay informed about Congresswoman Pelosi's work in the Congress, please visit pelosi.house.gov and scroll down to sign up for the Pelosi Update weekly email newsletter. Good afternoon and welcome to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi's telephone town hall meeting. Before we introduce Congresswoman Pelosi, we'd like to pose a poll question that you can answer using your phone keypad. The first question is, do you support raising taxes on the wealthy, those making over $400,000, and corporations to pay for the Build Back Better agenda? Press 1 if your answer is yes, and press 2 if your answer is no. We will provide the responses later in our program. It's now my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Pelosi. Congresswoman?
Thank you very much, Dan Bernal, for your kind words and your committed service to our city. I'm very proud of the work you do as the chair of the Health Commission in San Francisco to keep us well informed about the progress we are making, and thanks to the leadership of Mayor London Breed, the cases of the pandemic are going down. I want to first acknowledge the recent loss of two beloved community leaders, Janice Mirkatani and Jim Hormel. Their families are in our prayers during this sad time. As we are being prayerful, let us remember those suffering in Haiti and, of course, the people in Afghanistan. As we do acknowledge Afghanistan, let us be grateful to our veterans and their families for their patriotism and the contribution they make to our safety. My friends, this evening is our 8th town hall meeting during this pandemic, and we're proudly joined by my colleague, Chairwoman Kathy Castor, who is working hard to save our planet as the chair of the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. I'm very excited that she's with us. She's a congresswoman from Florida. Linda Asato, the executive director of the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. She is a tireless champion for our families. And Rudy Gonzalez, he's been on our calls before. He's the Secretary-Treasurer of the San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council and a force for our workers. America's working families are the unifying force for the Democrats in the Congress. As our city, just as we go forward, I just wanted to talk about, as Dan Bernal mentioned, we're talking about the work that we're doing in the Congress to build back better. As you all know, and we've talked on these calls before about the American Rescue Plan that was successful in putting shots in the arms of hundreds of millions of shots in the arms of the American people, money in the pockets of our families, children in school safely, and people back to work. In order to do that, we had the child tax credit, which people have already been receiving on the 15th of July, now 15th of August, the child tax credit, which is a historic tax cut for working families, and it's benefiting more than half of the children in California 12, our districts. Families began receiving the second payment from this credit last Friday, since the 15th was over the weekend. Again, rental assistance, a big issue. The moratorium on evictions that Maxine Waters wrote into legislation last year came due now, and the rental assistance is protecting struggling families and mom and pop landlords. In San Francisco, $182 million is still available. So if you need assistance, well, we can tell you how to do that, and I will later. Our city is grateful for Mayor Breed and Governor Newsom for leadership in administering these benefits for our frontline workers, and we thank our frontline workers for their courage and sacrifice. Again, my granddaughter was back to school this week, and I'm so excited that it seems to have been successful. So we are hoping to close the budget gap and help kids get back to school. So that was just touching on some of the things that the rescue package did. But now we must go forward with our Build Back Better agenda, with more jobs, more support for families, and bold climate action. In the Build Back Better agenda, that's called that by President Biden, Build Back Better agenda. We call it Build Back Better with Women, and I'll tell you why. As we rebuild our communities, we want to do something better. We want good paying union jobs to rebuild our roads, bridges, transit, etc. But we also, in addition to building the infrastructure of our country, we want to build the personal infrastructure of our country. That's why we're so pleased that in our next bill, the reconciliation, which we call Build Back Better, we have significant threshold crossing sums for child care, the child tax credit to be extended, family and medical leave paid, family and medical leave, home health care workers getting the proper respect that they deserve, workforce development, the list goes on and on, housing, education, the greening of our economy as we fight off the climate crisis. That's what needs to be done. While we're respectful of the work that was done in the infrastructure bill in the Senate, we need to do more in the reconciliation in the Build Back Better agenda, and we'll be talking about that in the course of the evening. Helping women return to the workplace with child care and paid leave is transformative. When we say Build Back Better, it means with many more people who have previously been unrepresented fully in the workforce, and where women can count on it. Advancing immigration reform to secure a pathway to citizenship, that's in our reconciliation bill. Building on the rescue plan to progress to lower health care costs for families and bring down the price of prescription drugs. That's a big fight that we're in now. Promoting education, including universal pre-K for our children, free community college. We'll have that in San Francisco, but we have it nationally, and more. And creating new jobs for San Franciscans with the Civilian Climate Corps and the Clean Energy Initiative for the future. When the House returns next week, we will continue to work on both a bipartisan infrastructure bill and a forthcoming Build Back Better bill that meet the needs of the families of the Bay Area and beyond, and we will do so advancing equity and justice for all. As I always say, the three most important issues facing the Congress are our children, their health, education, their economic security, their families, environmental, in which they can succeed, in a world at peace in which they can reach their fulfillment. These bills will advance those vital goals. So I thank you all for joining us this evening. I look forward to hearing your questions. But first, it is my honor to yield the floor to a fearless leader in the fight against the climate crisis. Chairwoman Kathy Castor will tell you about her efforts as chair of the Select Committee and how they interact with the Build Back Better agenda. She has been acclaimed across the board in the environmental community about putting forth a report that was unprecedented in the history of the Congress. It's my honor to welcome my colleague, Chairwoman Kathy Castor of BARD.
And before Chair Castor speaks, for those of you who just joined and have a question for any of the speakers, just press 0 on your phone keypad now to be added to the queue. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Chair Castor?
Well, thank you, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for your leadership on clean energy and jobs and climate action. Climate change has been one of your flagship issues during your service in the Congress, and you're recognized as a global leader for climate action. Friends, scientists are telling us that unless we act now, humanity will suffer catastrophic impacts and enormous cost due to the climate crisis. Californians know this, unfortunately, all too well. Blazing wildfires are destroying communities, taking lives, exacting enormous costs, leaving behind significant damage. In other parts of the country, extreme heat waves have been particularly brutal this summer. The heat was so unbearable in June that it melted cable car lines in Portland, and it shattered temperature records in more than 5,000 cities and towns. And on Friday, we found out that July 2021 was the hottest month ever recorded. So there's no more time for half measures. That's why we are hammering out the Build Back Better for the People agenda in the Congress right now. These are generational investments to expand clean energy, double down on climate resilience, climate solutions that will keep Americans safe. And Speaker Pelosi often talks about climate change as a moral imperative. We're all deeply committed and understand our moral obligation to our kids and future generations. She's right. A lot of the Build Back Better agenda is based upon Speaker Pelosi's vision of climate action. A couple of years ago, she
Sounds like we may have lost Chair Castor. Well,
in climate, can you hear me now, Dan?
Yeah, you're back.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Last year, our climate crisis action plan released. I encourage you all to see it or go view it at climatecrisis.gov. Is the most detailed fundamental report on climate action ever produced in the U.S. Congress. So let's get specific now. What does the Build Back Better agenda propose for climate action? We want to power homes across America with clean energy through new initiatives that clean up the power sector. We want to put Americans to work expanding clean energy, solar, wind, energy efficiency, manufacturing the technologies of the future, and building the electric vehicles here in the USA. We want to lead by example by electrifying the federal vehicle fleet and make federal buildings run cleaner. Big investments in transit and rail. bicycle, pedestrian paths, connecting communities. And we're going to invest in environmental justice and ensure that at least 40% of our investments directly help communities of color, tribes, and working class Americans. We also want to hold polluters accountable for dangerous methane and carbon emissions. And in a visionary move, we want to create a new civilian climate corps to help rebuild communities, expand clean energy, and provide those kind of opportunities to down at the grassroots level. For farmers, we want to make farmers and rural Americans more resilient to and use climate-smart agriculture and forest management. These are the historic investments that will put us on track to meet President Biden's climate goal of slashing carbon pollution in half by 2030. And then we'll continue to work to get to net zero as soon as possible and no later than 2050. So thank you, Speaker Pelosi, for your commitment to solving the climate crisis. I cannot wait to get back to work to pass the Build Back Better agenda for the people. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Castor. And before we move on, we'll bring forward the results from the first poll question, which was, do you support raising taxes on the wealthy, those making over $400,000, and corporations to pay for the Build Back Better agenda? 85% of you said yes, and 15% of you said no. Our next poll question, do we need to ensure that the jobs created by the Build Back Better agenda are available to all communities and people? If your answer is yes, press 1. If your answer is no, press 2. Congresswoman Pelosi?
Yes, let me thank Kathy Castor for her thorough presentation, her values-based and energetic plan to go forward, her vision and her plan to go forward, some of which we will try to incorporate in the reconciliation bill. We are limited by what the parliamentarian in the Senate will allow. That's most unfortunate because without having 60 votes in the Senate, we do have resistance from the other side of the aisle in terms of their acceptance of the reality of the climate crisis, even though we had a red alert from the UN just within the past week. So thank you, Kathy. And yes, well, we go to put the bill, now that we've gotten the Senate version, the infrastructure bill, as I said, is a good piece of work, and it is bipartisan. It is not green. And we need to inject greenery into the reconciliation bill to offset that. Again, we think you can only build back better when you build back better with women and previously underrepresented people in our community. And with us to talk about child care, which is the liberating factor in all of this, is Linda Asato, as we mentioned before, Executive Director of California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. Linda has been a tireless champion for America's families. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, this evening, however, Linda Asato.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for both hosting this town hall and allowing me to share what families have experienced and the importance of including childcare and human infrastructure as part of the Build Back Better plan. If COVID has taught this nation anything, it's that without childcare, our families, our communities, and the economy would not function. Childcare is infrastructure. It connects workers and jobs. It makes all other work possible. And without a childcare system that works for every family, our economy will suffer in the short and long term. The unadmitted childcare crisis existed long before the pandemic shed light on these vulnerabilities created by an underinvestment in childcare. And now that we know, we cannot go back to the way things were. High-quality, affordable childcare in this country is too often out of reach for parents. Too often, childcare educators are underpaid for the incredibly important job that they do. And Congress needs to step up and address this chronic underinvestment in childcare because it has significant negative consequences for families' economic stability, gender, racial, and economic inequality, child development, and school readiness. For example, childcare remains extremely expensive and out of the reach for too many families. For low-income families, childcare expenses for children under 5 eat up about 35% of their income. And families that scrape together the money for care may do so at the detriment of retirement savings, paying down debt, and even short-term things like food or transportation needs. If we have a federally supported system, access to affordable child care would increase the lifetime earnings for women with children, which can lead to an increase of private savings and an additional amount in Social Security benefits. And American businesses lose an estimated $12.7 billion each year due to child care challenges. So they also benefit from a federally supported care and human development system for families. Earlier this year, Congress provided much-needed relief to working families with the child tax credit and direct support to families and child care providers to make ends meet and keep doors open. And the Build Back Better agenda and proposed American Families Plan addresses the long-term systemic issues not only with America's child care system and includes other vital efforts that help end poverty, invest in our children, families, and our economic future beyond this pandemic period. So I'd like to close by noting that this cohort of young children represents the country's future workforce. They are our pipeline of future leaders that we're preparing to compete in the global economy. And to reach this potential, they and we deserve to support their success from birth. Childcare, paid leave, universal pre-K, pre-kindergarten, free community college and education for students, and healthcare all need to be part of this year's budget bill as a critical companion to the overall infrastructure bill. Madam Speaker, as your constituent, I support you and your colleagues to make bold long-term investments to build on the provisions that were in the American Rescue Plan and to make those temporary items a permanent part of our landscape. And thank you for allowing me to express my views on these bills.
Thank you, Linda Asato. And for those of you who just joined and have a question for any of the speakers, just press 0 on your phone keypad now to be added to the queue. We will try and answer as many questions as possible. Congresswoman Pelosi.
Well, I want to thank Linda for her very clear presentation about why it is important to have human infrastructure in here and why this is not just good for families, which would be reason enough to do it. It's good for the economy, and it's good for the future. It is transformative, and I thank President Biden for his courage for going forth so boldly. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get bipartisan support for this. That's why we're going to reconciliation, which could limit some of our opportunity on the climate side, but we're going to fight as hard as we can to get them as much as we can, but to serve notice that this is the path that we are on. It's for the children. Saving the planet is for the children. The initiatives I talked about are for families and for the children. As our colleague Chairman Cummings of Maryland said, children are our messengers to a future we will never see. We must make that future one that is good for the children. And now I'm going to talk to introduce someone whose family is so lovely, values children, and he also has been on our town halls before. Rudy Gonzalez is the Secretary-Treasurer of the San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council. Again, as I said before, a force for our workers. He is part of events that we've been to before COVID and tried to construct one way or another since. When we look at some of the challenges that we face, we always say we don't agonize, we organize. And we add to that, we unionize. Everything I said about home health care workers and the rest, we want to see them unionized as well. Rudy, thank you for being with us to talk about what's in the infrastructure bill and why it's important to go beyond that. Thank you, Rudy Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Representative and Chair Castor, Executive Director Linda Asato, Dan, and all the staff, and good evening to all the callers. My name's Rudy, and I'm proud to represent hardworking people of the construction workforce that make up our 32 affiliated unions here in San Francisco. We work in every aspect of the construction sector, from soils and material testing work of operating engineers to finished floors and expert glasswork of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Our apprentices and our journey workers are of this community, and This bold and historic investment that's on the horizon means real opportunity for people in San Francisco and the greater region and across the country. 1 in 5 of our apprentices comes from a justice-involved or foster youth program, or as a veteran. 72% of our apprentices are people of color. These transformative pieces of legislation will have an impact and for people who desperately need work right now. In fact, just in San Francisco, we're seeing construction unemployment that's unmatched since the Great Recession. Our out-of-work list has grown to over 1,000 skilled and trained workers, and I'm here to say we are ready to go to work with the Build Back Better agenda. The timing of these important legislative opportunities really couldn't be better. And even from an economic recovery or stimulus perspective, these are massive investments. You'll hear in the press about roads and bridges and rail. When you look at some of these numbers, they really tie everything together. Chair Castor talked about the climate crisis. There's $73 billion in this infrastructure bill to update our nation's electricity grid. That's how we're going to have the capacity to move toward more renewable and a green future. There's $15 billion. That represents good jobs for people, but it's key to protecting our children, to remove lead pipes in our water systems. And there's billions for clean buses to help our school districts incentivize buying made-in-the-USA buses that are electric and to put electronic charging stations all across our heavily traveled roadways and in the general public space. This is also going to be great for people in San Francisco. These kind of investments can be paired with shovel-ready projects that our communities need. For example, at a San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, they have plans to improve our wet weather pump stations on the west side, to put a new Treasure Island wastewater treatment plant and other sewer improvements. There's about $8 to $9 billion in water and power infrastructure work that San Francisco alone wants to do over the next 10 years. And through this type of massive investment in infrastructure, those can become a reality. With them, living wages, health care, and retirement security. So those are all big numbers we hear about in the press. It's big opportunity. I want to leave you with a smaller number. A takeaway for us is every dollar invested in infrastructure generates $3.70 in economic return. That's economic return for our struggling small businesses like our restaurants, for our workers who have been on the front lines of the pandemic, for our healthcare infrastructure. All of that economic return stimulates our local economy, and these investments are really important. Now, we are ready to build. We have young people, historically disenfranchised communities. Importantly, we have veterans in our Helmets to Hard Hats program. They are ready to go into our programs. All we need is Congress to act on these investments. But it's not just the brick and mortar. Even with a hard hat on my desk here, I know that the human investment and the human infrastructure, the SCIU healthcare and in-home healthcare workers that allow us to go to work, that take care of our families, they have to be invested in too. And as a career negotiator, there's no one I could think of that I have more faith and trust in than you, Madam Speaker, to negotiate and organize and win both of these transformative pieces. The reconciliation bill has to move in sync with the infrastructure bill, and your building and construction trades in the district support you, Madam Speaker. With that, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy Gonzalez. Before we move into audience questions and answers, we'll share the results of our second poll question. The question was, do we need to ensure that the jobs created by the Build Back Better agenda are available to all communities and people? 91% of you answered yes, and 9% of you answered no. Our third and final poll question before we go into caller questions and answers: do you think the investments in clean energy and climate measures outlined in the Build Back Better agenda are essential to slowing the impacts of climate change? Press 1 for yes and press 2 for no. Now we will go into our first audience question, and that is Carl in San Francisco. Carl, you are brought onto the live line.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, Speaker Pelosi, I want to ask if you will fight for getting a version of the American Dream and Promise Act to provide a path to permanent residency for TPS, DACA, and DED holders in the American Families Plan as part of that reconciliation bill? Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Carl. Before I answer your question, I want to thank Rudy for his enthusiastic presentation of what is in the infrastructure bill and recognizing the necessity of having the human infrastructure as well. Rudy knows of what he speaks because he used to be chair of the San Francisco Labor Council, so he knows, again, what we need to do to create good paying jobs across the whole spectrum of our economy and our society. Thank you, Rudy, for your, again, enthusiasm for what will come. And yes, we will pass both bills. Carl, your question is just what we're about. We have $107 billion in the reconciliation package, in the Build Back Better package that is applied to the Dreamers, the Promise Act, TPS, DACA, and all of that, and with a path to citizenship. This is in the bill. Now, the question is, and I have asked it early on, will it survive the parliamentarian in the Senate? And I said, I want this early. I don't want this something at the end. This is early so that if she has an objection, we can make whatever changes we need to make. But this is vital to us. Maybe more than you ever want to know on the subject, what is contained in a reconciliation bill is what is relevant to the budget. Does it add or subtract? Do you have to get more revenue, or do you have to have an offset? And so this $107 billion is not incidental. Sometimes they say, well, it's about money, but it's incidental to the full bill. It is not incidental. It is central to the bill. And we will fight until we get that. We must have it. And the path to citizenship, which is very popular in the country. And Democrats, Republicans, Independents, just not that popular among some on the other side of the aisle in in Congress. But it doesn't mean we're not going to fight to get it. The 60-vote requirement in the Senate is a hard mountain to climb. It's a steep mountain to climb. But we can get it with 51 votes if we get the approval from the Senate parliamentarian. And that's why we're trying to act very quickly and move fast so that we can still preserve the 51-vote privilege. I thank you for your question and your enthusiasm for this. This is essential for us. Yes, it is for our whole caucus. I think Kathy Castor can attest to that as well. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question is from Omar in Pacific Heights. Omar, you are on the live line to ask your question.
Hi, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you for making the time. My question is regarding the current crisis in Afghanistan. Due to the U.S. involvement since the 80s in this proxy war and later military intervention, we must accept more refugees and be intentional about it. So my question is, do you have any current legislation in mind to address this crisis and bring refugees to the United States?
Yes, indeed, Omar. We had a legislation that we already passed a little while back, maybe 2 months, month and a half ago. It's called Allies. It says averting loss of life and injuries with expanded SIVs. SIVs are the visas. The visas. I read that title because the acronym is Allies. And that is what, on the basis of that, the administration has been getting out a number of people already, a couple of thousand right off last week, right away, of people who had helped us in Afghanistan. And then there are other people who indirectly helped us through NGOs and we call we have the SIV visa. I want and that SIV means Special Immigration Visa. If anyone has some concerns about this, what I want you to do is to do this. Here's the case number. Pelosi, no, this is the site, pelosi.house.gov. pelosi.house.gov. When you call there, you will see the form to be filled out for repatriation and the rest. But in addition, it will tell you to call my office so that we can, again, pay specific attention to your case. That number is 415-556-4862. As you can imagine, we are spending a great deal of time on the Afghanistan repatriation and our special immigrant visa, as well as those for the NGOs who are working there, have worked with us there. So what we want is for the administration to make sure, and I talked to Malala earlier today and her initiative for women and girls, which is one that we have shared and is a priority. Democrats and Republicans, women in Congress have come together. Laura Bush, Michelle Obama, Jill Biden, this is not a partisan issue to support for women and girls in Afghanistan to make sure that they are safe. But what we need to do right now is to make sure that our military is at the airport in sufficient time and sufficient number in order to assure the evacuation of those who have helped us and those who want to leave, in addition, in my view, to just the American citizens who are there. So this is all systems go, and I appreciate your question, Omar. If you have a particular personal request, go to the website if you have or call the office, and we will put you in touch or help to solve the challenge that might be faced. But this is very important to us. And let me just say this. The White House, President Obama signed the Allies Act into law on President Biden signed the Allies Act into law on July 30th. It was ready just in time for these evacuations. What I do want to do, again, as I said at the beginning, is to thank our men and women in uniform and their families for their sacrifice and service in Afghanistan. We owe them so much. And in our reconciliation bill, we have increased funding under leadership of Mark Takano, the chair of that committee, for our veterans. Thank you, Omar. Anyone else want to add anything about Afghanistan, of our guest? Kathy, did you want to say something about that? I don't know if we're still connected, but okay, let's go on.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Omar. And as a reminder, if anyone has a question for any of the speakers, just press 0 on your phone keypad to be added to the queue, and we will answer as many questions as possible. Our next question is from Amy in the Mission. Amy, you're on the live line to ask your question.
Hi, this is a question for Speaker Pelosi. There are so many overwhelming things happening right now, but the biggest thing, I think, is the threat to our democracy from the Republicans and the suppression in all the laws in the state houses. What can we do at a national level to get the Voting Rights Act passed so that we continue to have a democracy? And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much, Amy, for your very important question, which is fundamental to our democracy. And I'm so pleased that this is a priority for you because it is, again, essential to our democracy. So where we are on that is we introduced H.R. 1, which is legislation. It's called the For the People Act, sponsored by Congressman John Sarbanes of Maryland. He's been on some of our calls. In any event, with that, we do four things. The first piece was written by John Lewis, the first 300 pages, to end the voter suppression acts in our country. He wrote it in 2017. It's even gotten worse since the last election, where so many voter suppression laws have been enacted. Many introduced, some inactive. All of them must be defeated or just taken overcome by federal law. So that's in that first part. Second part of it is to end partisan redistricting. We wanted to have commissions. It's a little bit late now because we couldn't get the bill passed in time, but we do have criteria in there for how districts should be redistricted in respect to the Constitution, the Voting Rights Act. The list goes on in terms of communities' integrity and the rest. That's really important. The third part of it is the empowering of small donors and grassroots activists. We think this is very important. It's very popular in the country, matching funds for small donors so that their voices are enhanced. It's not federal taxpayer dollars. It's money taken from charges made to those who have broken the law. So in any case, that is one of the fights we're having right now in the Senate. And the fourth part, both money pieces are all of it very popular in the country. The fourth part is to stop the big, dark, special interest money in politics. And as people have a right to give it. The court has given them all of that in the Citizens United decision. But we want to make sure it is disclosed so the public knows. And businesses have said to us, we won't give if we have to disclose. We don't want our shareholders, our employees, our customers, our community around us, our stakeholders to know what we're doing politically. In some cases, some of them don't care. But anyway, those are four things in H.R. 1. I would add to that, because we already have a bill to add to that, the stopping of the nullification of election results. You're seeing it around the country. You see it in Georgia right now. They're going to say in Fulton County, which has Atlanta, we're going to appoint somebody, or a few people who decide if the election should count or not. Really? But Martin Luther King talked about nullification in the I Have a Dream speech. He saw that then. They want to do that now. We cannot let them happen, because if that happens, we will no longer have a democracy. So that's our fight there. Now, in addition to H.R. 1, we have H.R. 4. H.R. 4 was introduced yesterday. We had a hearing on Monday. It took this much time because not only did we have to correct what they did several years ago in the Specter versus Holder, but we had to correct what they did just like in June with the most recent assault on our voting rights by this Supreme Court. So it took that much validation to get this done. So in any event, it's now ready. They had the hearing on Monday. It's introduced yesterday. Terry Sewell introduced the bill. Our own Zoe Losgren from here, very much a part of it with Jerry Nadler and others. So that is what we are doing in that regard, and we're fighting for that. Kathy Castor, I want you to respond and weigh in on voting rights, because I know how active you have been in all of this for a long time. Chairwoman Castor?
I think we still may be having problems with Chairwoman Castor's line unless she's on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can.
Oh, good. I am so glad that you have a voting rights question out there, because I want folks to know that yesterday when Speaker Pelosi announced to the House Democrats that indeed we would be taking up the John Lewis Voting Rights Act next week, that there was a cheer among all of the House Democrats, and a cheer I think I heard all across the country. This will, of course, it's named for our dearly, the beloved John Lewis, this great civil rights champion, and he would be so proud of Speaker Pelosi. Yes, this is meant to undo Supreme Court rulings that gave states and other jurisdictions more leeway to put restrictions on voting access. that are now being enacted at an alarming rate. I come from the state of Florida, and voter suppression was the top of the GOP agenda here in my state. But the latest, this version now is very carefully crafted to help us identify discriminatory elections practices in those states and jurisdictions that were previously covered by the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance requirements that allow the Department of Justice to review local law for discrimination prior to their enactment. And it will help us address, again, what the Supreme Court has gutted. And if we're going to really tackle climate change, workers' rights, immigration, empower the people on all of these things, this is central to to the progress of this great country. And I am thrilled that we're going to be taking it up next week, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Kathy, for your leadership on this and the fight that you have made on it. Any fight that Madam Chair engages in, she does enthusiastically to save the planet, to save our democracy. Thank you, Castor.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Congresswoman. Our next question is from Mariella in Ocean View. Mariella, you are on the live line.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. My name is Mariela Corey Santillan, and it is a pleasure to join this call. I would like to thank you for all the great work that you do for children, our future. I am from San Francisco, and my question is why it's important to invest public funding in early education. Quality matters. All of our children deserve high-quality education, regardless of ethnic background or learning ability. Early educators strive to provide excellence in education. In San Francisco, California, we are focused on an anti-bias curriculum to nurture all our youth. Although this discussion is about children and curriculum, we must acknowledge the tremendous efforts of our teachers as frontliners during this critical time. Teachers in early education need better pay and health benefits. I am speaking for family child care providers, as I am one educator that has a small program and who serves families of low income and all these different backgrounds. So we are struggling to find teachers due to the low pay. We are subcontracted with the city and the state, but we have no health coverage or retirement plans. Our field is struggling to find support, and the job is demanding and too risky due to this pandemic. Without childcare, there is no infrastructure. We need to invest in early childhood education. What can we do? I know that last year we learned so much, but we are lacking support.
Thank you very much, Mariella, for your very important question. In fact, probably investing in our children, early childhood education is the most important thing that any of us can do as families and as a country. So thank you. Mariella, let me say a couple things. First of all, when it comes to budget and people complain about investments that we make, I want to remind them, and as some of you have heard me say on these calls, nothing brings more money to the Treasury. Nothing brings more money to the Treasury than investing in education. Earliest childhood education, K through 12, higher education, post-grad, lifetime learning for our workers. Return to the Treasury. It is not a cost. It is an investment that pays off for us. And then specifically to your question, the universe in our reconciliation bill, we have a universal pre-K plan outlined in the Build Back Better. It ensures all employees participating in preschool programs and Head Start earn at least $15 an hour. Then those with comparable qualifications will receive salaries commensurate with those of kindergarten teachers. The investments, again, This is part of, again, to benefit the children. And again, you said it so clearly and so well. We have to value the work that these teachers, instructors are doing with better pay, because we have to value what they do. Again, in the bill, the child care child care is designed to pay a real living wage so that we can have confidence that they will be desirable jobs and people will be attracted to them and want to continue on them. Again, another investment that helps children and others, investments in home care support families who need child care, providing safe, reliable, high-quality care delivered by well-trained child care workforce, and invest in child care facilities. But in the home care, which goes broader for children, for people with disabilities, for seniors in a family, again, we want the people to be well paid. And as I said earlier, I want them to be unionized. So, again, the basis of your question, respect for the work that people do, to value it, to value that work, to honor it with not only wages but benefits and the rest. So I thank you for that question. It is central to our bill, and it is necessary for us to make progress across the board in terms of communities that have been previously underrepresented. I would say that at reference that some of you have made, many of these problems existed before COVID. They were all with us for a while. But COVID really pointed out that unless we have justice and fairness in our economy and reward work and recognize the value of women and others in the workplace, and that what is based on child care and early childhood education, then we're not going to build back better. That's why I say build back better with women. When women succeed, America succeeds, all the things that we've been saying all along. But it is important. So when people say, well, why don't you just do the infrastructure? Well, yeah, we want to do it, but we want to do it to the advantage of our entire community. Now I would like to yield for the closing remarks to our special guest. But on this question, I'll begin with Linda and Rudy, and then for their closing remarks, and then back to Kathy. Rudy, since this has union ramifications, why don't I yield to you first on this question?
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Appreciate being here with all of you. Look, our number one priority is getting our people back to work, and for us to realize the Build Back Better agenda for the American people, these two pieces of legislation have to move as one. You have our full support for that. There will be a lot of noise made about just past the infrastructure, but without the human infrastructure, without the human support, without the innovative programs and ideas like, supporting our home care workers and money for project-based rental assistance, those things won't be realized in whole. So we support you moving both together in unison. I trust you. And while my number one priority has to be getting our people back to work with these two pieces of legislation, it's also my top concern as a labor leader and a person in the working class to defeat this dangerous Republican-backed recall of our governor on the home front in California. And so for all of us in San Francisco, we have to run up the score and say no to this recall for the safety of our communities and for the progress of our state. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Rudy. Thank you so much for joining us. Ruth? Linda, would you like to speak to this particular issue and any other remarks you want to make in closing?
Great. Mariela, I want to say we hear you, we see you, we appreciate you as a child care provider, and I know the Madam Speaker also has been a wonderful advocate for the entire child care community and for families, particularly low-income families. So I just want to first say that we do hear you and appreciate you. Rates has been and as the speaker mentioned, having a living wage has been one of our biggest priorities, and part of the holes in the system is because of the historic underinvestment in childcare, and that is why for many of us advocates, we have been tirelessly and fearlessly really focused on living wages for the providers, and really very cognizant of taking care of your health. And so that is things from being able to have time to be able to attend to the needs of your own health needs or your own just rest, and many other of the benefits. Those are all part of what we know is part of supporting and running a business and taking care of yourself, or we risk losing you, we know, to other industries and other things, and that really affects parents' ability to have care and work. So it is all part of a jigsaw puzzle that we're well aware of, and you are in our minds as we do our advocacy. I just want to let you know that. And then in closing, I think the President's Build Back Better plan reflected in the congressional budget is a win for all. It's a pathway for progress on healthy development of children, progress on gender, racial, and income inequality, improved education outcomes, and economic growth and prosperity. And this is an incredible window of opportunity for us to put a forward path that we desperately need in this country. So I thank you, Madam Speaker, Chair Castor, Rudy, and the Trades Council for each of your leadership in doing your best to reflect our SF values and to move this Build Back Better plan forward. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very, very much, Linda, for your comments and for your leadership, which I will comment on again. But I wanted to yield to Kathy Castor for any remarks that she want to make on any subject she heard in the Q&A, or any comments she'd like to make about how we go forward to Build Back Better. Thank you, Kathy Castor.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and Linda and Rudy and everyone out there in San Francisco. It's a real honor to be able to participate today, and we understand our responsibility in the Congress right now, and we're fortunate that President Biden and the administration, they're all in when it comes to building back better, and when it comes to the climate crisis, we understand this moment in time. The International Panel on Climate Change just last week warned us that we are headed towards calamity unless we act now to reduce pollution. And we are going to follow our responsibility. We understand it. We intend, through the Build Back Better budget, for the people to unleash the clean energy economy, an economy that values workers, that centers environmental justice, and really answers our moral call to action. So you can count on us. We need all of your energy focused on all policymakers in Washington in order for us to get this across the finish line. But we will do it. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for joining us this evening and for your very determined commitment to saving the planet and to building back better as we do so. My friends, when you heard our colleagues, our friends on the call this evening talk, they made the case as to why we must have both the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill. We cannot be acting in old ways. We have to be acting for the future. And that's why the reconciliation will be greener and more fair and just with equity. 40% of the funding going to communities that have been underserved in terms of the environment. It's a beautiful sight to behold. And now we are in the process of sitting under the cap of the dollar amount that the Senate has sent over, that the administration has sent over. I just want to say something about President Obama. Excuse me. Happy birthday to him. I so put out of my mind the name of the former president, the most recent one that I've reverted back. President Biden, you may not know this, but President Biden was the first senator introduced climate change legislation decades ago. He is fully committed to this. He has understood the challenge from the start. So we are in good hands with his leadership and his being receptive to initiatives from the Congress. We just have to get it past the Senate parliamentarian to get as much of it as possible. Our chairman of the Transportation Committee, Peter DeFazio, has for decades been working. Nobody knows more about making green transportation, that's his forte, than Peter DeFazio. So we're in good hands with what he has to propose. I do want to, as I said earlier, I wanted to give you the site for the emergency rental assistance. sf.gov/rent-help. sf.gov/rent-help. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not a slash. It's a backslash. Okay. Let's start again. sf.gov/rent-help. sf.gov/rent-help. And there, if you're seeking assistance, we have extended the moratorium in the courts, but at least it's buying us time in order for us to get the money into people's hands so they can pay the rent. The landlords can pay their mortgages, and but more importantly, families will not be evicted. I said I'm not going to see baby cribs out on the street with personal belongings and the rest. That's not going to happen. We must prevent that from happening. That is a San Francisco value. People talk about San Francisco values. I'm proud to represent them, proud to represent all of you. I'm very honored by the participation of Rudy Gonzalez to have my colleague, Kathy Castor, here with us today, and to have Linda Asato present the work that she has done for the children. This is all for the children. So I want to thank all of you for joining us. Again, it's going to be a very eventful week. We have a lot to attend to, and we want to do so in a very unified way. As I say to my colleagues, our diversity in our beautiful caucuses, over 70% women, people of color, LGBTQ. Our diversity is our strength. Our unity is our power. And we want to be as powerful as we can for the people. Thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you, Jen Burnell, for honchoing this meeting and getting our questions out there and hearing the questions from our constituents. We thank you all for your participation this evening. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Mariella, for your questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Pelosi. Before we
and
close...
Amy, on voting rights, we're very proud to have that question as well. Thank you. Thank you all.
So, before we close, here are the results of our last poll question. The question was, do you think the investments in clean energy and climate measures outlined in the Build Back Better agenda are essential to slowing the impacts of climate change? 91% of you said yes, and 9% of you said no. Thank you again for joining Speaker Pelosi and her guests for today's telephone town hall. If you have a question that was not addressed during tonight's event or would like to leave a message for Congresswoman Pelosi and her staff, please stay on the line and you will be connected to voicemail. To receive email updates on Congresswoman Pelosi's work on behalf of San Franciscans in the Congress, please visit pelosi.house.gov and scroll down to sign up for the Pelosi update. This concludes tonight's event. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your evening.
Stay safe.